The morning Elliot Voss discovered the truth. It was raining. Not the soft, cinematic kind of rain that poets write about. The kind that washes things clean and makes everything look new. This was a cold, indifferent downpour, the kind that doesn't care what it ruins. It hammered against the windows of their brownstone on Calloway Street, flooding the gutters, pooling in the cracks of the sidewalk below. Elliot stood at the kitchen counter in his undershirt, brewing coffee he would never drink, and stared at his phone. The message had come in at 2:14 a.m. It wasn't addressed to him. He had picked up Sasha's phone by accident. They'd had matching cases since she'd bought them in a 2-for-1 deal the previous Christmas, laughing about how they were becoming one of those couples. He hadn't meant to unlock it. His thumbprint had simply registered in the dark, the way it sometimes did when their phones lay side by side on the nightstand. He'd squinted at the screen, assuming it was his own, and begun scrolling through notifications. The name that stopped him was Dominic. His brother's name. Still thinking about last night. You're the only person who makes me feel like I'm not disappearing. Elliot read the message 4 times, then 5. He set the phone down on the nightstand with such careful precision that it made no sound at all, and he lay back on his pillow, staring at the ceiling until the room began to lighten. He did not wake Sasha. He did not call Dominic. He simply lay there while the architecture of his life quietly collapsed around him, the way old buildings sometimes do, not with an explosion, but with a low, final groan, and then silence. Elliot Voss was not a man who raised his voice. His therapist, Dr. Mara Sinclair, had noted this early in their sessions, not as a compliment, but as a concern. You internalize everything, she'd told him once, leaning forward in her chair with the kind of measured patience he'd come to associate with people who charge $200 an hour. The silence isn't peace, Elliot. It's pressure. He'd smiled politely and changed the subject. He thought about Dr. Sinclair now, standing in his kitchen at 6 a.m., watching the rain destroy the garden Sasha had spent 3 summers building. The lavender she'd planted along the back wall was bent sideways. The rose trellis had come loose on one side and was swinging against the fence. He thought, this is what it looks like from the outside. Then he poured the coffee down the drain, went upstairs, and began to pack a single bag. There are things a person learns about themselves in the hour after devastation. Elliot learned that he was more organized than he'd imagined. He folded shirts. He matched socks. He took his passport and his grandmother's watch and the backup hard drive from his desk drawer, and he moved through his own home like a man cataloguing a crime scene, calm, precise, and utterly hollow. Sasha slept through all of it. She was lying on her side when he paused in the doorway, her dark hair fanned across the pillow he'd slept on for 7 years. She looked peaceful in the way that people do when they don't know they've been caught. He stood there for a long moment, memorizing her without meaning to, and then he turned and walked down the stairs and out the front door into the rain. He didn't leave a note. The first person he called was no one. He drove for 4 hours with his phone face down on the passenger seat, following a highway that pointed north simply because north felt like the direction of erasure. When he finally stopped, at a gas station outside a town called Harrow's Mill, he sat in the parking lot and looked at himself in the rearview mirror for a long time. He looked like his brother. That was the thing nobody ever mentioned about betrayal within a family, how the face of the person who hurt you is mapped onto your own. Dominic was 2 years younger, same jaw, same dark eyes, same long hands. Growing up, strangers had sometimes mistaken them for twins. Their mother, Renata, had always beamed at this, as though 2 sons who looked alike were twice the proof of something. Elliot pressed his fingers against his jaw and breathed. Then he turned his phone back on. There were 6 missed calls from Sasha, 2 from Dominic, which meant she'd already told him, 1 from his mother, 1 from his aunt Cecile, which meant the word had spread to the outer rings faster than he'd expected, a text from his cousin Tobias that said simply, "Brother," Call me. Whatever it is. He put the phone back face down. He went inside and bought a bottle of water and a road map, the paper kind, because something about the gesture felt important, felt like choosing to navigate by his own hands, and he asked the man behind the counter if there was a motel nearby. Pinebrook, about 6 miles east, the man said, not looking up. Nothing fancy. That's fine, Elliot said. I don't need anything fancy. The motel room smelled like cedar and old carpet. There was a painting of a mountain above the bed that had been hung slightly crooked, and for some reason this detail made Elliot's eyes sting for the first time since morning. He sat on the edge of the mattress and let himself feel, for exactly 60 seconds, the full weight of everything he was carrying. Then he stopped. He took out his laptop and began the process of disappearing. He had a skill set that made this easier than it should have been for most people. Elliot worked in architectural design, specifically in the niche, quietly lucrative world of private residential projects for clients who valued discretion above all else. He worked remotely. He invoiced under a company name. He had savings that nobody in his family knew the full extent of, because he had always been the quiet one, the careful one, the brother who didn't need to make noise to get things done. Within 48 hours, he had changed his primary email address, transferred his accounts, forwarded his professional inquiries to a new contact point, arranged to sublet his home office address in the city to a colleague. He left no forwarding address. He found the town of Aldervane by accident, or what felt like accident, though Dr. Sinclair would have probably said there are no accidents in the decisions of people in pain. It was a small coastal town, the kind that exists slightly outside of time, where the main street had a bakery and a hardware store, and a bar that doubled as a community meeting room on Tuesday evenings. The ocean was close enough that you could smell it from the single-block commercial strip, and the houses climbed the hills behind the town in weatherboard layers, like scales. He rented a place on the edge of town from a woman named Petra Holt, who asked no questions and accepted 3 months' rent in advance with the efficient warmth of someone who had seen all kinds of arrivals and knew better than to ask what they were running from. "There's a good trail behind the house," Petra said, handing him the key. "Helps some people think." "Thank you," he said. He did not tell her his real last name. For the first 2 weeks, the silence was a physical thing. He would wake in the early hours and lie in the unfamiliar dark and feel the absence of his life pressing in from all sides. The absence of Sasha's breathing beside him. The absence of his phone lighting up with his mother's daily check-in texts. "Just thinking of you, my boy." The kind he'd rolled his eyes at for years and now, in their sudden disappearance, felt like a severed limb. He had blocked everyone. Not in a fit of rage. He'd done it methodically, the way you would winterize a house. Sealed the windows, shut off the water, locked the doors. He blocked Sasha. He blocked Dominic. He blocked his mother Renata, his father Gareth, his aunt Cecile, his cousin Tobias. He blocked the family group chat, which had immediately flooded with messages he'd read in the single minute before he hit block. His mother's "Elliot, please." Dominic's "It's not what you think." Sasha's "I love you. Please come home. Please let me explain." And he had read every word with the careful, dissociated attention of a man who has already decided. He did not reply to any of them. He disappeared. Aldervane had a small library that doubled as the town's unofficial social hub on weekday mornings, staffed by a young woman named Vesper Crane, who wore paint-stained overalls and had an opinion about everything that she delivered with cheerful, undaunted confidence. Elliot came in for the Wi-Fi and stayed because Vesper didn't try to make him talk. She simply handed him a library card on his 3rd visit and said, "You look like a man who reads things he already knows the answers to. That's not a criticism, it's a diagnosis." He looked at her. "And the prescription?" She pointed at a shelf near the window. "Try something useless, completely useless. Art history, ancient geography, something that won't help you with anything." He pulled out a large illustrated volume on the lost cities of the Byzantine Empire and sat with it for 3 hours. It helped somehow. The irrelevance of it. The distance. 3 weeks into his disappearance, Elliot met Ro. Ro Callahan ran the bar at the end of the main street, the Anchorage, and he had the particular combination of warmth and reserve that Elliot associated with people who had also, at some point, walked away from something. He was about 50, with a greying beard and hands that moved with practiced economy behind the bar, and he never once asked Elliot what he was doing in Aldervane. They developed a ritual of Tuesday evenings. Ro would pour a glass of whatever he'd opened that week. Elliot would sit at the corner of the bar, and they would talk about things entirely unrelated to either of their real lives. Architecture, the tidal patterns of the coastline, a documentary Ro had watched about migratory birds. "You make good decisions," Ro said one evening, out of nowhere. Elliot looked up. "Why would you say that?" "Because you didn't come in here the first week and drink yourself into a story I'd have to pretend not to remember. Whatever happened to you, you didn't blow it up. You just stepped back from the blast radius." Elliot was quiet for a moment. "My therapist would disagree with that framing." Ro shrugged. "Therapists are paid to find the damage. Bartenders are paid to find the person still standing." It was Vesper who found him out. Not his real identity. She still knew him only as Elliot Cole, the name he'd given Petra. But she found out the shape of what had happened, in the oblique way that perceptive people do, by noticing what isn't said. They were sitting in the library after closing one evening, Elliot helping her reorganize the architecture section, because she'd confessed she had no system, and it was driving her slowly mad when she said casually, "Do you have people somewhere?" "What kind of question is that?" "The kind I'm asking." He kept his eyes on the shelf. "I had people." "Did they die?" "No." "Did you?" He turned to look at her. She was watching him with those direct, paint-stained overall eyes, and he found, to his considerable surprise, that he wanted to answer. "I cut them off," he said. "All of them. My whole family. My wife. Everyone." She nodded slowly. "Was it the right call?" "I don't know yet." "But you haven't gone back." "No." "And you haven't let yourself grieve it either," she said. "You've just been maintaining the cut, keeping it clean." She paused. "That's not healing, Elliot. That's preservation." He didn't answer, but he thought about it for a long time after he went home. The twist came on a Thursday. It came the way the worst things do, quietly, through a side door, wearing an ordinary face. He had walked into Petra's kitchen to return her casserole dish and found her sitting at the kitchen table across from a woman he recognized. His cousin, Tobias's sister, Imara. She was the one family member he hadn't blocked, not because he'd meant to spare her, but because he'd simply forgotten. She'd changed her number 2 years ago, and he hadn't updated his contacts, and so her name hadn't appeared on the list when he'd gone through it. Imara, who was sharp and quiet, and had always been the one person in the family who told the truth without dressing it up. She looked at him across the kitchen table with an expression he couldn't immediately read. "Sit down," she said. "How did you find me?" "Sit down, Elliot." He sat. Petra had the good grace to take her casserole dish and disappear. Imara had driven 6 hours. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. She'd spent 3 weeks locating him through a combination of methods she described with brisk, unapologetic efficiency. A mutual colleague who'd received a redirected invoice, a credit card transaction at a gas station outside Harrow's Mill, a photograph posted on the Aldervane Community Facebook group by someone who'd seen him on the trail and tagged the location. "You're not as invisible as you think," she said. "Apparently not." "I'm not here to bring you back," she said immediately, because she had always understood what he needed to hear first. "I'm not here from Mom or Dominic or Sasha. I'm here because there's something you don't know, and you deserve to know it before you finalize whatever decisions you're making." He looked at her steadily. "What don't I know?" Imara folded her hands on the table. "Sasha didn't have an affair with Dominic," she said. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. "I read the message," Elliot said carefully. "I read what he wrote to her. I know what he wrote. I know what it looked like." Imara pressed her lips together, then continued. "Elliot, Dominic has been in therapy for the past year, not because of anything with Sasha, because of what happened to him when you were both kids. He told Sasha about it 8 months ago, because she was the one who noticed something was wrong with him at Christmas and asked him directly. She's been helping him through it, being a safe person for him while he figured out how to tell your parents, how to tell you." Elliot stared at her. "The message," she said quietly. "You make me feel like I'm not disappearing. He's been disappearing for 30 years, Elliot, into something that happened to him when he was 9 years old. Something neither of you have ever talked about, because in your family, the rule was always silence." The room tilted. He thought of his brother's face. The way Dominic had always been the louder one, the one who filled rooms with noise, and how Elliot had always assumed that was confidence, never once reading it as the alternative to silence, as the sound a person makes when silence has become unbearable. "What happened to him?" Elliot asked. His voice came out strange, low. Imara told him. He listened without looking away. When she finished, neither of them spoke for a long moment. "She was protecting him," Elliot said finally. The words cost him something. "She was protecting him," Imara confirmed. "She didn't tell you because he asked her not to. He wasn't ready. He was going to tell you himself. He was working up to it. And then you disappeared, and he thought—" She stopped, steadied herself. "He thought it meant you'd somehow found out what happened to him when you were kids, and that you couldn't bear to be around him anymore. He's been in crisis for 3 weeks, Elliot. Real crisis." Elliot stood up from the table, walked to the window. The ocean was visible from here, just barely, a thin strip of grey light at the edge of the hills. He thought about the silence he had perfected, the clean, precise, architectural silence he'd built around himself, like a load-bearing wall. He thought about his brother, 9 years old, learning how to disappear. He thought, we learned it from the same place. We just built different rooms. He didn't go back immediately. That would be too simple, and nothing about this was simple. He called Dominic first. The phone rang 3 times, and then his brother's voice came through, cautious, cracked at the edges in a way Elliot had never heard before, because Dominic had always performed wholeness with such conviction. Ella. "I'm sorry," Elliot said. "I didn't know. I misread everything, and I disappeared on you when you needed." He stopped. Tried again. "I'm sorry." A long silence. Then, "I should have told you. I wanted to. I just didn't know if you'd—" "I would have," Elliot said. "I would have." They stayed on the phone for a long time, saying very little, which was its own kind of language. The two of them, separated by hundreds of miles, finally occupying the same silence instead of building walls with it. He called Sasha the next morning. That conversation was harder, longer, more layered. Because even with the misunderstanding resolved, there were 7 years of things left unsaid between them. Years of Elliot's careful, architectural quiet that she had sometimes mistaken for peace and sometimes correctly identified as distance. And years of her learning to stop asking what was on the other side of that silence because the answer was always nothing. "I'm fine." "You just left," she said. No note. Nothing. I know. I woke up and you were gone. I didn't know if you were dead. I know. I'm sorry. I need you to understand that sorry isn't. She stopped. He could hear her breathing, trying to find the shape of what she needed to say. I need you to understand that what you did, Elliot, the disappearing, that's the thing we need to fix. Not just what you thought happened. The thing that made disappearing feel like the only option. He leaned against the wall of the motel room that smelled like cedar and old carpet, looking at the crooked mountain painting, and thought about Dr. Sinclair's voice. The silence isn't peace, Elliot. It's pressure. I know, he said for the third time. And then, because it was the most honest thing he'd said in months, I don't know how to stop doing it, but I want to. He stayed in Aldervane for another 2 weeks before he drove home. He told Vesper, on his last evening in the library, what had happened, the whole shape of it. She listened without interrupting, which was generous given her general instinct toward commentary, and when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You know what the thing is about preservation, she said finally, versus healing? Tell me. Preservation keeps the form but loses the function. A preserved building can be beautiful. You can walk through it, admire the architecture, take photographs, but nobody lives there. She tilted her head. Sounds like you've been a very well-preserved building, Elliot. He laughed. It surprised him. The realness of it. The way it moved through his chest. Yeah, he said. I think I have been. He stopped at the anchorage before he left. Roe poured him a glass without being asked and leaned against the bar. Leaving? Yeah. Fixed? Elliot considered this. No, but moving toward it. That's different from where I was. Roe nodded slowly. You know what I've learned, running a bar for 20 years? He picked up a glass and turned it in his hands. People come in here looking for an ending, a drink that closes the chapter. What they almost never realize is they're actually looking for a beginning. They just need somewhere quiet to gather themselves first. He set the glass down. Sounds like you found your quiet place. I think I used it as hiding, Elliot said, but maybe that's the same thing for a while. He shook Roe's hand. He left a tip that was excessive and didn't care. He drove home on a clear morning, the highway pointing south, the sun doing that specific thing it does in early autumn, where it hits everything at a low angle and makes the ordinary world look momentarily significant. He thought about his brother, about the 9-year-old boy who had learned to fill rooms with noise because silence had become the thing that hurt him, about Sasha, who had held that secret with careful, exhausted hands, trying to protect two people who were both, in their different ways, already disappearing. He thought about his mother Renata, who had built a family on the premise that love looked like closeness, and closeness looked like silence about the difficult things, and how that was a kind of architecture too, just one that couldn't hold weight. He thought about what it would mean to go back, not as the man who had left, contained, precise, sealed, but as something less finished, something with visible load-bearing damage that still, somehow, intended to stand. He pulled up to the brownstone on Calloway Street in the early afternoon. The garden had recovered from the rain. The lavender along the back wall had straightened. The rose trellis had been resecured, the loose side nailed back against the fence by careful, familiar hands. Sasha was sitting on the front step. She had known he was coming. He'd texted an hour out, because some silences were worth breaking early. She was holding a cup of tea in both hands, and watching him pull up to the curb with an expression he recognized from 7 years of mornings. The one that meant, I have a list of things to say to you, and none of them are ready yet. He got out of the car. He didn't say anything clever. He didn't have a prepared speech. He had spent a month perfecting silence, and he was done with that particular skill. I know we have a lot to fix, he said. I know I left in the worst way. I know that's a problem, not just a mistake. She looked at him. "I want to fix it," he said, "if you'll let me try." She didn't answer immediately. The autumn light hit everything at its low, meaning-making angle. Somewhere down the street, a door opened and closed. Then Sasha moved slightly to one side on the step, making room. He sat down beside her. They didn't speak for a long time, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the sealed, pressurized kind he had spent his whole life building, but the open kind. The kind that has a door in it. The kind people can actually live in.